The scent of freshly cut oak dust, usually a balm to my soul, felt like grit in my lungs. That Thursday afternoon, I loaded the last of my heavy tools into my pickup, my movements jerky with a frustration that had been aging for 3 weeks. The client, a man whose net worth was a rounding error in the national debt, had just requested another minor adjustment to his grand staircase. This adjustment involved undoing the last 40 hours of my life's work. My Friday, once a welcome finish line, was now a void. My name is Caleb Vance, and I don't just build stairs. I build the spine of a home, a craft that demands precision, patience, and a piece of myself in every joint. Pulling into my driveway at 5, the sight of Ilara's slate gray sedan was the first tremor. She was never home this early. Her Thursdays were marathons of depositions and strategy meetings at Rowe, Bennett, and Lachlan, the legal fortress where she was forging her career. A knot of unease, cold and heavy, settled in my stomach. I came in through the back as always. The house was steeped in a tense, expectant silence. I heard the shower running upstairs, a sound so out of place in our carefully calibrated routine that it felt like an alarm. Ilara was a creature of morning rituals. I peeled off my work clothes, the fine, fragrant dust a second skin, and headed upstairs, a sense of dread climbing my spine with each step. She was standing in our bedroom, shrouded in steam and the scent of expensive soap. A black dress, elegant and severe, was laid out on the bed, a slash of darkness against our white duvet. She was beautiful, but a stranger. The familiar landscape of her face was altered by an expression I couldn't place, a brittle cocktail of resolve and something that looked unnervingly like pity. "Hey," I began, my voice a tool I couldn't quite control. "You're home early. Did I miss something on the calendar?" She took a slow, deliberate breath. "No, Caleb, you didn't forget anything." She turned from the mirror to face me, her eyes holding mine. "I'm going away for the weekend. I'll be back Sunday afternoon." The simple words landed like stones. "A work thing?" It must have come up suddenly. "Not exactly." Her gaze didn't waver. "I'm spending the weekend with Preston. Preston Rowe. The firm's senior partner, a man who moved through the world as if he owned it. The name was an invasive species in the quiet garden of our home. The room seemed to contract around me. "Spend the weekend? Ilara, what are you talking about?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "He has a suite at the Monarch," she said, her tone unnervingly calm, as if she were dictating a memo. "It's important for my career, Caleb. You have to understand the world I operate in. This is an investment in us, in our future." The rationalization was more sickening than a simple confession would have been. She had packaged her betrayal as a pragmatic career move. An investment? The words tasted like ash. "No, I don't accept that. This is our marriage, not a corporate merger. You can't just—" "What I can't do," she interrupted, her voice gaining a sharp, defensive edge, "is let your small-town view of the world hold me back. This is how the game is played. Preston is the most powerful man in my field. His patronage is everything. This weekend solidifies that." The doorbell rang then, a shrill, imperious sound. "That's him," she said, her composure cracking for just a second. A flicker of panic crossed her face. "Caleb, please, don't make a scene. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." As she hurried downstairs, the rage I'd been suppressing ignited. My hands curled into fists, every instinct screaming at me to follow her, to physically eject this cancer from my home. But then, a colder, sharper thought pierced the red haze. Violence was a blunt instrument. It was his world, not mine. Preston Rowe operated in the realm of influence, threats, and loopholes. To beat him, I had to fight him on my own terms. I walked to my dresser, picked up my cheap, durable work phone, and started a video recording. I slipped it into the pocket of my t-shirt, the lens a tiny black eye. Then I walked downstairs, my steps measured and calm. Preston Rowe was standing in my foyer, looking utterly at ease. He had an arm resting lightly on Ilara's shoulder, a gesture of casual ownership. He smiled when he saw me, a predator's smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Caleb," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "Ilara tells me you're having some trouble understanding the necessities of her career." "Ember, I understand that you need to leave my house," I said, my voice a low growl. He chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound. Let me offer you some free legal advice. A man in your position, a simple tradesman, can find himself in a world of trouble very easily. Computers can be compromised. Unpleasant things can show up where they don't belong. Reputations can be ruined overnight. It would be a shame if your life became complicated. Do you follow? He wasn't spelling it out. He was painting a picture, leaving the most monstrous details to my imagination. His gaze flickered down and caught the glint of the camera lens in my pocket. His smile vanished. "Are you recording this?" he hissed. In a move of surprising speed, he lunged, snatching the phone. After a failed attempt to unlock it, he hurled it against the tiled floor, where it shattered. "A valiant effort," he sneered, his composure restored. "But you're out of your depth. Stay out of this. Don't contact her. Don't cause any trouble. If you do, I promise you, the complications I mentioned will become your reality." He steered a silent, pale Elara out the door. I stood alone in the ruins of my marriage, the broken phone a symbol of my apparent defeat. But as the door clicked shut, my gaze drifted to the bookshelf across the room. There, nestled between a collection of woodworking journals, was the lens of my home security camera. A silent, impartial witness, Preston thought he had destroyed the evidence. In his arrogance, he never imagined the real trap was the room itself. The silence in the aftermath was a physical presence, pressing in on me. I stared at the fragments of my work phone, each piece a tiny reflection of a life that no longer existed. The ghost of Elara's perfume hung in the air, a cruel mockery of intimacy. I refused to break. Not yet. I took out my personal phone, the one Preston Rowe didn't know existed, and made the only call I could. "Gideon," I said, my voice a raw thing. "I need you." Gideon Croft wasn't just my best friend. He was the brother I'd chosen. He had been my rock when my sister Emma, his wife, had been taken from us in a senseless accident. He had stayed, weaving himself permanently into the fabric of my family. He understood loss, and he understood loyalty. "Caleb, what is it?" His voice was sharp with immediate concern. I told him everything, the words spilling out in a jagged, angry torrent. An hour later, he was there, with his wife Charlotte by his side. She enveloped me in a hug that conveyed a fierce, protective anger on my behalf, while Gideon set down bags of takeout on the kitchen counter. "You're not alone in this, Caleb," he said, his hand firm on my shoulder. After the quiet ritual of eating, I brought my laptop to the living room. "Show me," Gideon said. We watched the high-definition footage from the security camera. Charlotte's hand flew to her mouth when Elara explained her investment. Gideon's face became a granite mask of cold fury as Preston laid out his veiled, insidious threats. When the video ended, Gideon was silent, his mind clearly working. "That arrogant bastard," he finally said, his voice dangerously low. "He's smart enough not to spell it out, but the threat is clear. It's professional, grade intimidation, but he's made a critical mistake. He did it in your home, on your turf." "So, we have him?" I asked, a desperate hope rising. "We have the start of something," Gideon corrected, his lawyer's mind dissecting the situation. "But Preston's power isn't in the courtroom. It's in the hallways and the judge's chambers. His father built an empire on favors and influence. Preston inherited it. If we file a civil suit for blackmail, he'll use his network to bleed us dry, to delay and dismiss until it disappears." "Then what's the move?" I felt the hope begin to curdle. A hard, calculating light entered Gideon's eyes. "He gave us the strategy, Caleb. He threatened to make your life complicated through your computer. He thinks you're a simple carpenter, and he expects a simple reaction, anger, despair, maybe a foolish lawsuit. We give him something else." He leaned forward. "We don't just build a defense. We build a trap. We let him think his intimidation worked. We let him make his move, and we document every single step." The plan was terrifying in its scope. We weren't just waiting for an attack. We were inviting it. Gideon was already on his phone. "I'm calling in a specialist. We need to be perfect." Sloan Kennedy arrived looking more like a grad student than a top-tier cyber investigator. But her eyes were sharp, missing nothing, and she moved with a quiet, purposeful energy. We showed her the video. She watched Preston's performance with a detached, clinical interest. "Classic narcissist," she diagnosed when it was over. "He believes his own hype, which makes him predictable. He'll delegate the dirty work, but he'll want it done quickly and cleanly to prove his power." Oh. She laid out the plan with chilling precision. For the next hour, she turned my home office into a digital fortress and a baited trap. She helped me scrub every byte of personal and business data from my desktop, creating an encrypted, external backup. Then, she performed a forensic wipe of the hard drive, leaving it utterly pristine. Finally, she installed a small, unassuming module on my router. "This is a packet sniffer on steroids," she explained. "It won't block anything, but it will create a mirror copy of every piece of data that tries to cross your network from the outside. If they try a remote attack, we'll have a recording of the entire session, their IP address, the files they upload, everything." She packed her gear. "The trap is set. Now we wait for the predator to walk into it." After they left, I stood in the quiet of my home. It was no longer just a house. It was a weapon. And I was waiting patiently for my enemy to hand me the trigger. The weekend was a hollow echo of time. On Sunday evening, the sound of Alara's car in the driveway sent a jolt of ice through my veins. I had spent the afternoon methodically relocating her life into the guest room. I had installed a new key-locking doorknob on my bedroom door. It was a petty act, perhaps, but it was a declaration. She had surrendered this territory. She walked in with an air of strained nonchalance, a performance for an audience of one. "I hope you had some time to think," she said, her voice cool. I didn't look up from my book. The silence stretched, filled with everything we weren't saying. "Fine," she snapped, her mask of composure crumbling. "Be like that. Preston warned me you'd be difficult." She swept past me and headed upstairs. I listened to her footsteps, followed by a sharp, disbelieving silence, and then a roar of fury. "Caleb, what did you do?" I found her standing before the locked bedroom door, her face contorted with outrage. This wasn't part of her plan. She had expected a broken, passive man she could manage. My kid defiance had shattered her script. "That's my room now, Alara," I said calmly. "Your things are in the guest room." "This was not the arrangement," she sputtered. "Preston said—" "I don't care what Preston said." I cut her off. "This is my house. He is not the master of it." "Oh." She stared at me, her anger mingling with a new unwelcome flicker of fear, before storming into the guest room and slamming the door. Minutes later, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. "Alara tells me you've locked her out of her room. Fix it. Don't make her life difficult." It was Preston, not with explicit threats, but with the arrogant commands of a man used to instant obedience. I screenshotted the messages and sent them to Gideon. "He's trying to establish a pattern of you being unreasonable," Gideon texted back. "Perfect. Keep them all. Do not engage." The next morning, Alara left without a word. At precisely 10 a.m., as I stood in my workshop, my phone lit up with a text from Audra Finch, my new divorce attorney. "Papers have been served." A profound, grim finality settled over me. The silence from Alara's end was deafening, and as Gideon predicted, deeply suspicious. "They're not fighting, they're plotting," he said over the phone. The alert from my home security system came late that afternoon. Motion detected, home office. My heart began a frantic, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I sent a quick message to Gideon and pulled up the live camera feed. The scene was exactly as Sloan had predicted. Alara stood nervously by the door, while a thin, weasel-faced man I'd never seen before sat at my computer. My stomach churned as I watched him pull a flash drive from his pocket and plug it in. He was methodical, his fingers flying across the keyboard. The camera, positioned perfectly, captured a clear view of his face. While he worked, Alara moved through the house like a ghost, gathering the last of her possessions in black trash bags. After 15 minutes that felt like an eternity, the man shut down the computer. "Done," he said. He pocketed the flash drive and left. Alara followed shortly after, dragging her bags behind her like a burden of guilt. The moment the front door closed, my phone rang. It was Gideon, his voice a tight coil of energy. "We have them, Caleb. We have them cold." The packet sniffer caught everything. A direct data upload from a flash drive. No remote hack. They were sloppy. They were arrogant. He paused. "The bait has been taken." A wave of something dark and triumphant washed through me. The trap, so carefully constructed, had been sprung, and Preston Rowe had no idea he was already caught in its teeth. "Go home. Act as if nothing has happened," Gideon instructed, his voice a steadying presence through the phone. "They've made their move. The next one will be reporting you. It will likely be tomorrow. Be ready, Caleb." The drive home was a journey into the heart of a storm I had summoned myself. My house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a stage set for the final brutal act. I slept fitfully, waiting for the sound of sirens that never came. The next day at the workshop, I tried to lose myself in the grain of a piece of cherry wood, but my hands felt clumsy, my focus shattered. The alert came just after noon. Intruder detected, front door. My breath hitched. I texted Gideon and pulled up the security feed. It wasn't a burglar, it was a SWAT team. They used a battering ram to splinter my front door, the alarm shrieking for a few moments before the feed went dead. Gideon called immediately. They cut the main line. I saw enough. They're here for you. Sterling is on standby. Remember what he said. Say nothing. An hour later, a cruiser glided silently into my workshop's parking lot. Two detectives in sharp suits stepped out. They didn't need to ask who I was. Caleb Vance? One of them asked, though it wasn't a question. You're under arrest. The cold click of handcuffs around my wrists was a visceral shock, a physical manifestation of my powerlessness. They led me out past my stunned employees, the shame of the moment burning my skin. In the car, the questions began, calm, probing, persistent. I focused on the city blurring past the window and built a wall of silence inside myself. The police station was a sterile labyrinth of beige walls and muted tension. I was processed, my belongings cataloged and sealed in a plastic bag. I was placed in a holding cell. The hours stretched into an eternity. Finally, a guard appeared. You have a visitor, he said, his tone bored. Your lawyer, I guess. But the man who entered the small, airless interview room was not my lawyer. He was a portly man in a cheap, shiny suit, his face flushed. He introduced himself as a public defender, though I had never requested one. Mr. Vance, he began, his voice slick with false sympathy. You're in a great deal of trouble. They found some very, very nasty material on your home computer. The evidence is overwhelming. He opened a file, though he never looked at it. However, I've had a preliminary chat with some influential people. There may be a path to a plea agreement. A short sentence, probation, but you'd have to plead guilty now. Take this offer. People like Mr. Preston Rowe, they are not men you want as enemies. This is your only way out. It was brilliant in its cowardice. Preston wasn't here. But his presence filled the room. This wasn't a legal offer. It was a threat delivered by proxy, a move designed to terrify me into submission while giving him plausible deniability. The system itself was his weapon. I want to speak to my lawyer, I said, my voice hoarse but firm. Sterling Cole. The man's greasy smile faltered. He hadn't expected me to have counsel, let alone someone of Sterling's caliber. He gathered his papers and left without another word. An hour later, the real Sterling Cole arrived, his tall frame radiating a palpable aura of command. His jaw tightened as I recounted the visit from the public defender. Despicable, Sterling murmured, but also a gift. He just showed his hand again. He's trying to intimidate a witness and interfere with counsel. He's panicking. Sterling looked me in the eye. You'll be in front of a judge for a bail hearing tomorrow. The bail will be high, designed to keep you here. Gideon is ready for it. You held strong, Caleb. The hardest part is almost over. Appearing in court the next day, shackled and wearing an orange jumpsuit, was the most humiliating experience of my life. I pleaded, not guilty, my voice echoing in the cavernous room. The prosecutor argued I was a flight risk, and the judge set an exorbitant bail. But as promised, Gideon was there. The paperwork was signed, the bond posted. Late that afternoon, I walked out of the courthouse, a free man. Sterling met me at the bottom of the steps. The city air had never tasted so sweet. He tried to use the weight of the system to crush you, Sterling said as we walked to his car. He never considered that we could use its integrity to crush him. When I returned home, the splintered front door hung open like a wound. Inside, chaos reigned. They had torn the place apart. But as I stood amidst the wreckage, a quiet, cold resolve solidified within me. Preston Rowe had invaded my home, my marriage, and my life. He had tried to bury me. He had no idea I was a seed. Sterling Cole moved with the swift, decisive grace of a master craftsman. He didn't just counterattack. He dismantled Preston's entire offensive with cold, legal precision. He assembled a comprehensive evidence package for the district attorney's office, a damning narrative told through video files, data logs, and sworn affidavits. It included the initial threats in my living room, the logs from Sloane's packet sniffer showing the exact time and nature of the data upload, the clear footage of Alara's accomplice, and my detailed account of the proxy threat delivered by the sham public defender. The case landed on the desk of a senior inspector, a woman renowned for her bulldog tenacity and her utter disdain for those who believed they were above the law. According to Sterling, she viewed the evidence not as a case to be investigated, but as a personal affront to the justice system she had sworn to protect. 10 days after my arrest, the ground shifted. Sterling called. "It's done, Caleb," he said, a rare note of triumph in his voice. "The DA is dropping all charges against you. You are officially exonerated." The world, which had been a muted gray of anxiety, suddenly flooded with color. I sank into a chair in my workshop, the scent of cedar and sawdust filling my lungs, and for the first time in weeks, I breathed freely. "There's more," Sterling continued. The inspector was so incensed by Rowe's blatant manipulation that she fast-tracked the investigation into him. Warrants were just issued. Preston Rowe is being charged with blackmail, conspiracy, and fabrication of evidence. Alara is being charged as a co-conspirator. That evening, Gideon and Charlotte insisted I come for dinner. It was a celebration, quiet and profound. On the drive there, my phone rang. It was Audra Finch, my divorce lawyer. "Caleb, I've just spoken with Alara's counsel," she said. "She is willing to sign the divorce decree immediately, no contests. She's waiving all claims. She has one condition, a single, private meeting with you." A meeting was the last thing I wanted, but the promise of a clean break was too powerful to ignore. "Arrange it," I told her. We met the following week in a sterile conference room. The woman who sat across from me was a ghost. The ambition and hardened resolve were gone, replaced by a hollow, cavernous shame. She looked fragile, broken. "Caleb," she began, her voice a reedy whisper. "Thank you for seeing me." I waited, my heart a cold, still stone in my chest. "I didn't just lie to you," she said, tears tracing paths down her pale cheeks. "I lied to myself. I built this entire narrative in my head where you were holding me back, where your life of craftsmanship was small and my world of power was important. I told myself that what I was doing was for us, a necessary sacrifice for a bigger future." She let out a shuddering sob. "But your life wasn't small, Caleb. It was real. It was honest. And I traded it all for a fantasy, for a man who valued people as objects to be used and discarded. I became one of them." Upset, she spoke for nearly an hour, not to excuse her actions, but to dissect them, to understand how she had become so lost. It was a painful, raw autopsy of her own ambition. "When they came to arrest me," she confessed, "the spell didn't just break, it shattered. I saw the ugly, pathetic truth of what I had chosen. I lost you, and I lost myself." She finally looked up, her eyes pleading. "I don't expect your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just needed you to hear, from me, that I know what I destroyed." I looked at the woman I had once promised to love for a lifetime. The anger was gone, replaced by a profound and weary sadness. "I hope you find your way back, Alara," I said softly. It was all I could offer. Facing a mountain of irrefutable evidence, Alara accepted a plea deal, agreeing to provide a full, damning testimony against Preston. His network of powerful friends vanished overnight, unwilling to be tainted by his spectacular fall from grace. The trial was a formality. The videos played in the silent courtroom were devastating. Preston Rowe, the master of the universe, was sentenced to 11 years in a state penitentiary. The scales of justice, which he had tried for so long to rig in his favor, had finally, decisively balanced. In the quiet months that followed, I began the meticulous work of reconstruction. The civil suit against Preston and his now imploded law firm settled quickly, a silent admission of their guilt. The financial settlement was substantial, and the first check I wrote was to Gideon, a sum that made him protest, but which I insisted upon. He hadn't just been my lawyer, he'd been my anchor in the storm. Vance Stairways, my business, began to thrive in the wake of the publicity. There's a certain appeal, it turns out, to hiring the craftsman who brought down a titan. I used the capital to expand, acquiring a small, high-end door manufacturer and bringing its talented team into my fold. My workshop was alive again, filled with the hum of machinery and the easy camaraderie of people who love what they do. I was creating again, not just with wood and steel, but with the very architecture of my life. A few weeks after the divorce was finalized, Gideon and Charlotte staged an intervention in the form of a backyard barbecue. "The Hermitage is officially closed," Charlotte declared, handing me a beer. It was there I met her sister, Olivia. She was an architect, and when she spoke about the interplay of light and structure, her eyes shone with the same passion I felt when describing the grain of a perfect piece of maple. We talked for hours, an easy, unforced dialogue of two people who understood the language of building things. We started with coffee, then dinner. It was a slow, deliberate process of laying a new foundation. Life was becoming steady, peaceful, real. But there was one final piece of the old structure that needed to be dismantled. One final joint that needed to be severed. I drove to the state penitentiary on a day when the sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. The visitation room was a depressingly beige box, smelling of antiseptic and despair. When the guards led Preston in, I saw the change immediately. The tailored suit was replaced by a faded orange jumpsuit. The confident swagger was gone, replaced by a shuffling gait. The power had been stripped away, leaving behind a bitter, hollowed-out man. "Vance," he spat, his voice devoid of its former resonance. He looked at me with pure, undiluted hatred. I offered a placid smile. "Preston, the jumpsuit is a bold choice. Very humbling." I leaned back, affecting an air of casual ease. "I had dinner with your ex-wife, Ava, last week. She's doing remarkably well. She sends her regards." A dark flush crept up his neck. "You stay away from her," he growled. "Oh, I don't think so," I said, my voice dropping slightly. "See, that's the thing you never understood. You thought power was about intimidation, about forcing people to bend to your will. But real strength, Preston, is about building things. Trust, respect, a life. Things you only ever knew how to break." I stood up. My visit concluded. "You once told me there were things that were acceptable for a powerful man like you, and illegal for a simple man like me." I gestured around the bleak room. "It seems you miscalculated which one of us was which." I had one last thing for him. I pulled a folded piece of paper from my pocket and slid it across the table. It was a simple, elegant architectural drawing I had spent the previous evening perfecting. It was the blueprint for a beautiful, intricate spiral staircase. He unfolded it, his expression confused. "What is this?" "It's a design," I said, my voice soft. "It's for a client. Olivia, the architect, and I are collaborating on it. It's for the new house she and I are designing together." I paused, letting the words sink in. "I just wanted you to see what it looks like when someone builds a future instead of trying to steal one." I turned and walked away, leaving him alone with the blueprint of a life he could never have. As I stepped out of the prison and into the boundless open air, I felt the last lingering ghost of the past dissolve. The old structure was gone, demolished down to the bedrock. It was time to start building again.